Hello, welcome to our book discussion session on the Handbook of Open Universities around the world. I am Sanjay Mishra, along with my co-editor, Professor Santosh Panda. We are thankful to all the authors and particularly to our today's guest who have agreed to join us and discuss their respective chapters. Today's focus is Africa, and we have authors of four chapters from the book. And it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce each one of them to you in brief. Uh, each one of them has illustrious career in open and distance learning. And we are really privileged to have them uh, contributing to our book. Professor Paul Prinsloo had a distinguished career at the University of South Africa and retired as research professor in open and distance learning. He wears multiple hats with roles in leading institutions around the world, such as in countries like Canada, Germany, and Nigeria. He's an elected member of the Fellows Council and senior fellow of the European Distance and E-Learning Network and serves on various editorial boards. Um, Paul is an eminent scholar who contributed the African overview chapter for our book. He recently had an extensive tour of Malaysia, and maybe he will sprinkle some of his Asian experience as well when he talk about. We have Prof. Elijah Omwenga from University of Kenya, who is currently the vice chancellor there. Interestingly, he also served previously one of the organizations where I had some collaboration before, is where he was Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic and Student Affairs at University of Kabianga in Kenya before he joined Open University of Kenya. He contributed the Open University of Kenya chapter with Professor Ezra Maritim, who actually is one of the pillars of the planning and operationalization of the Open University of Kenya. He has been involved in conceptualization of the idea of the Open University in Kenya. A distinguished scholar in human development, he has served over 45 years in both conventional and distance learning institutions in Kenya, South Africa, Tanzania, Rwanda, and many other places around the world, serving many international organizations in his capacity as advisor and consultant, including his contribution to the African Virtual University project. Professor Letseka is yet another distinguished scholar in the African open and distance learning space, contributing to scholarship and mentorship of younger professionals around the world. Thank you, Professor Letseka, for joining today. Professor Letseka is Professor of Philosophy of Education at the University of South Africa. He's the holder of the UNESCO Chair on Open and Distance Learning and a member of the South Africa's National Commission for UNESCO and the Council of the National University of Lesotho. Thank you very much. And of course, our colleagues from Botswana, Associate Professor Dr. Bantu Morolong is in the School of Social Sciences at Botswana Open University. A career path spans over 40 years of university service. She, along with Dr. Seeletso, contributed the chapter on Botswana Open University for our book. Dr. Seeletso is currently the director of the South African Development Community Center for Distance Education. In brief, we call it SADC-CDE, based in Botswana Open University. Thank you, each one of you, for joining us today for this book discussion session. Over to you, Professor Panda, for your brief remarks and then to facilitate this discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjaya, and all our distinguished panelists. You are all welcome to this very interesting program. I'm pretty sure we will have an interesting dialogue and little critical reflection on the African part of the world. As I see including Asia as well as Africa, our open university system and distance learning system is moving faster. UNISA being the oldest distance teaching university in the world, I must say, even if British Open University came up as a formalized open university by designation in 1969, but UNISA almost more than 150 years old. And if you look at UNISA's history, it has evolved through a variety of struggles, developments, contributions, and policy initiatives, and maintaining equal parity with the quality system of higher education in Africa, more particularly South Africa. South Africa has a very stringent quality assurance in higher education. As I understand, I visited many times to UNISA with Professor Fred Lockwood and many others. So all our distinguished colleagues, Paul, Professor Letseka, Professor Elijah, Professor Maritim, Professor Bantu, Dr. Seeletso, all are welcome to this program. We will get back to Africa and the Africanization of distance learning, open and distance learning, including open education resources, open education, open pedagogy, and the business model, and to look at the future. So when Sir John Daniel, because last time we had the first podcast with Professor Sir John Daniel and Professor Steve Murgature, and I had asked an interesting question to Sir John himself on his iron triangle. So when he said that access, quality, and cost vis-a-vis technology, that was the iron triangle, and technology was later on to expand the iron triangle to go beyond the Egyptian pyramid to a little taller, squeezing the base. And he argued the case very well. And therefore, I think I should start with this, that how do we look at access, cost, quality, vis-a-vis technology, and employability has been the major issue. Equivalence, parity of esteem with the formal system of higher education in our respective countries. And what is our business model to look at for the future? So these are the concerns that we will try to look at through our program today. So without wasting time, let me invite, because Professor Paul Prinsloo has written the African overview, very interesting overview. I must tell our listeners, you must get hold of a copy of the book and read it. One chapter, unfortunately, we tried to make it an open source, but we could not succeed. Only one chapter is made as open source. And I wish that, and the initial introductory portion has John Daniel's introductory paper. And besides that, only one chapter from the European country is made open access. The rest of the chapters are not. And therefore but the book is very, very cheap in terms of its 740 pages of the book, 50 odd chapters. So Paul, your initial remark very quickly, 2-3 minutes, then we will get into question and answer. So each one we will have some initial remark to generally about the African and more particularly the South African context. Paul.
Thank you so much, Prof. Panna. Good evening, colleagues. Allow me firstly the opportunity to congratulate Dr. Sanjaja and Prof. Santosh for this incredible feat. 116 authors from 33 countries. It's really remarkable to have pulled this off, and I cannot imagine what it took from the two of you to have initiated and completed the project. Secondly, I also appreciate the acknowledgement in the introduction that though the different chapters provide a snapshot of a particular moment in time, you acknowledge that the different chapters do not present, and I quote, the official opinion of the universities concerned. And herein lies an interesting dilemma. The trust the reader has to have not only in US editors, but also in the different authors. It would have been almost impossible, I think, for institutions to have checked the different accounts and to verify not only the details, but very interestingly, the narrative. So not only would have been impossible, but it would have changed the very nature of the book. And compliments to the editors. I think every chapter with its authors have a very distinct tone of voice in how they approach their respective chapters. Just before I make 3 other remarks, Prof. Panda, looking at the book, I was reminded of the notion of origin narratives, origin myths. And it's fascinating to still find the traditional origin myths and narratives of open distance education or open distance learning in this book and various varieties of that. So I find the comparison of the notion of open university with the proposal from Tite in the introduction very interesting, with the influences of technology, the focus on both teaching and research, and the provision of mass undergraduate education. And although you briefly refer to the dilemma of open universities participating in institutional rankings, and the deeper issue that begs further research is the role of research as an essential key performance area for staff at open universities, and the increasing importance of offering postgraduate qualifications. I think both these issues, going postgraduate and the intensification of research, are linked to the ranking of universities. And I do think there's much more to explore in the tensions being a research intensive and an open university. A few years ago, I was made aware by someone at a mega open university that the institution was not a research university and therefore not research intensive, but rather research active. And from a personal perspective, the way that particular institution embraced expanding postgraduate supervision and enforced a rather brutal publication regime and incentives, I doubted whether the institution was not much more than research active, but were moving towards becoming research intensive. And that, I think, is a very, very interesting dilemma for open university, how to balance scale and undergraduate teaching with this increasing emphasis and race for rankings. Let me return to my section in particular on open university in Africa and Arab countries, a very, very interesting combination. When I wrote the African regional overview, I had access to the drafts from the Open University of Kenya, the newest kid on the block, and from UNISA, who interestingly speaks about themselves as the oldest open university, a point I'm coming back. Later, the Open University of Mauritius, the National Open University of Nigeria, and Zimbabwe Open University. An interesting observation, and I think there we get to the origin narratives, is the fact UNISA's institutional narrative that it is the oldest open university in the world, while the main narrative in the first 4 chapters of the book is that the Open University UK was the first one. So this contestation of who was first and who's the oldest, I find fascinating. So outside of the fact that the UNISA narrative is an interesting example of institutional statecraft, what is more interesting is that the chapter by Professor Alan Tate makes some very, very critical comments about the origins of UNISA, which almost stands out because he does not engage with the origin narratives of other open universities. But having said that, he points to how context shapes an institution. And that makes this handbook and the chapters on the African Open Universities such an interesting book and chapters. Each of the chapters of the African Open Universities bear testimony to how context shape what choices the institutions had in the past and possibly what choices they see themselves to have in the future. The second last remark from my side is that the official story of distance education, as told in books by white males from the global north or the minority world, do not represent a true picture of how rich distance education was and is on the African continent. This is a story that needs still to be told. There's a part of the evolution of distance education that has not yet been recorded. And I think these chapters help to put the African narrative on the map. Lastly, specific on the African continent, and I hope my African colleagues who would take me up on this. Another story that needs to be told is the coexistence of open distance learning centers in most of Africa's residential institutions. And I think that is a very particular and peculiar narrative on the African continent. So post-COVID, these centers, these open distance learning centers have been proliferating on the African continent. And they pose some very interesting questions pertaining to openness and the future of openness and the future of open distance learning as an institution on the African continent. So from now, big congratulations to Prof. Santosh and Dr. Sanjay, as all of the other authors in this section. Thanks, Prof. Panda.
Thank you, Paul, for a very interesting remark. That's called a dual mode university. We in India, we have also dual mode university. And post-COVID, most conventional universities have also gone online, distance, hybrid, blended kinds of things. So there's a lot more similarity between the African and the Indian subcontinent. And your remark on saying that the context shaping an institutional evolution and development. And we as open universities, as you rightly said, we are struggling actually to establish a parity in terms of research equivalence, research grants, rankings. And we in India tried our best to change the quality assurance, accreditation, regulation, and ranking process for open and distance learning, little skewed towards the open and distance learning, not exactly as the indicators of the higher education per se. So these are very, very interesting remarks. So let me get back to, we will come back again to Paul, and let me get to Professor Bantu for brief initial remarks, please. And as you know, Professor Bantu, I have visited many times, Professor Tau and Dr. Godson Gatsa, and we at IGNO, we offered with the help of SADC, master's programs in Africa, 4 countries in Africa. SADC has been very, very helpful to us, and you are being at the helm of SADC, which is very interesting to know. Dr. Bantu, please.
Muted, Professor Bantu.
Yeah, your audio.
Kindly unmute yourself.
I think probably. Oh, sorry. I was saying maybe I can step in for Prof when she's still trying to sort her
Yes, please.
microphone off. Sometimes we do have these technical glitches, so I can come in for him, Prof. Panda.
Please.
Yes.
By the time, yes, please come in.
I think basically I view
Dr. Seeletso, yes.
about the question posed was to give a view, on the chapters and in essence the African continent. Our thinking is that The chapter is very good. It's research based, and the contribution gives a synopsis of the knowledge and information on the historic revolution and evolution of open and distance learning. We have actually put into context and into perspective both the discourse and the practice in specified context. You know, we began by looking at what people perceive as ODL, where it's coming from, and where it is currently. So our thinking was that as we talk through the journey of open and distance learning, which now has embodied technology, hence the concept of ODL, we are thinking that this can actually take our continent even further, and not only our continent, but globally. Like, this is a global book, and we are talking about the global context. So that's basically, and in essence, our view about the chapter that we did and the rest of the chapters that colleagues have contributed. Thank you, Prof.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. We are very happy that not only you are hosting PCF 11, but also we are very happy that Botswana has become the Botswana Open University. This is a very interesting development, and this tells the story. Actually, this tells the story. I think
Yes.
Professor Bantu, his audio is on now. So, Professor Bantu, a few sentences from your side.
Thank you, Chair. I will speak to the timeliness of the chapter and also highlight some issues around relevance. And on timeliness, one is saying, for us, the authors, we think the chapter and the book are timely, particularly in an era where ODL, against the backdrop of advances in technology, needs to be positioned as a mode of choice in educational delivery. We are convinced as authors that with ODL, we have a very demonstrable ability for it to help education systems worldwide to facilitate effectively their response to global challenges around lifelong learning, access to education, equality, inclusion, democracy, and all of those issues that are burning within the UN 17 SDGs. In as far as issues of relevance are concerned, we see the chapter as contributing to the continuing debate about the legitimacy of ODL and its processes. We are celebrating the practice-oriented view of the book and also of the chapter at institutional level and also at national level. At institutional level, transformative, and at national level, also transformative, but transformative of the system. Our hope through the chapter is that the lessons that we are sharing in the chapter will be a useful springboard or springboards for future changes of the type and the magnitude that ODL is driving. We are also looking at the chapter and saying to ourselves, it's one of the many chapters in an edited handbook. And our view is that that puts the chapter and the outlook of the chapter on a global and worldwide scale. And we are convinced that that perspective, that global outlook, is what ODL should be perceived as. And we are underlining the fact that while the growth dynamics of ODL are contextual, that has already been mentioned earlier, focusing on the North-South particularly, there's also an identifiable set of threads that are holding ODL together worldwide. The concerns are the same, and at some instances they are the same, at some instances they are different, but we see a thread between what is happening around ODL in the different parts of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And just a small one, Prof.
Yes,
just a small one is what we also, maybe with the conversation as it progresses, we will also mention that we have learned great lessons from these chapters that became eye-openers to most of us, that we have been taking a lot of things for granted, the impact that open and distance learning can do, in transforming human lives, in developing people and stuff like that. But above all else, we really appreciated the historical development using Botswana College of Open and Distance Learning as a point of departure. It all started as a very small unit within Department of Non-Formal Education in Botswana. It expanded to be a College of Open and Distance Learning. And ultimately in 2017, it became a premier open university, a sole university in the Republic of Botswana that offers education through the open and distance learning mode. And what we are saying is that this is an amazing historical development that maybe other countries can take a leaf from. And we are happy that Namibia, our neighbor, is now knocking on our door to say, Bokodol, how did it turn into Botswana Open University? And these are lessons learned that maybe as we progress with this engagement, we can also share success stories of Botswana Open University, as well as Botswana College of Distance and Open Learning. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. Now the turn Professor Letseka. Initial remarks. Audio, your audio, please.
I'm good. I'm good.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, and I'm glad Paul is here. There's something, Prof. Panda and Dr. Sanjaya, that you don't know about Paul, and I need to open the can of worms. Paul and I are classic examples of people who have, how do I call it, Paul, an enduring lifelong learning culture. Paul and I were once miners in the gold mines of South Africa. You don't know that story. So you're talking about the illustriousness of my work, and Paul, we started in the dungeons as gold. I spent a year in 1976 as a winch driver underground. So Paul and I come from that culture. Whenever we see it, we remind each other. We were sitting in Edinburgh in Scotland. We were talking about our mining experience. Anyway, back to the issues. Dr. Mishra, thank you for the opportunity, but also let me emphasize that when you invited me into this project, I don't think you recall that I've been part of the Commonwealth process on a report that was led by Dr. Jaco Olivier. Myself and Dr. Alan Tate, we were invited to review a report that explored open universities in the Commonwealth. So when I got this invitation, I thought, the Commonwealth is really serious about openness. And thank you for that. Prof. Banda, I think we have met, I don't know if I recall, I think you were at the ICDE in Toronto, if I recall, or
In
yeah,
Calgary.
somewhere. Calgary, yes.
Not in
Calgary, yes.
not
Calgary.
in RCDE, but that was PCF, not
yes, PCF in
RCDE.
Calgary, and I was
That's
there
right,
in Calgary too. So I mean, I met Dr. Sanjay Mishra and Prof. Romila Mohi. So yeah, I mean, we come from a long time where, but looking at the book, and I want to reiterate what my colleague Prof. Prinsloo said. For me, I was amazed by the broadness, the breadth of the book, the coverage. Dr. Mishra, you followed me. I boasted about this whole book on LinkedIn, and I basically let everybody else know a book of this nature that covers open universities, Jesus, in the African and Arab world, a book of this nature that traverses open universities in the Americas, in the Asian countries, in Europe, is huge. I mean, we have done huge projects at UNISA with Paul. I looked at this, and like Paul, I was wondering, how in the world did you manage to, as it were, find synergies in all these people and create such a globally cutting edge project? And for that, I can only take my head off. You guys are brilliant. Prof. Panda, I followed your work at Indira Gandhi. You know, I can tell you for many years I've been an admirer of your work, but Dr. Mishra's work that he's been putting in on OERs and everything, and it's just amazing. So for me, this is huge. While on that, this podcast comes in at the right time. At the end of last year, I was appointed as a UNISA Cordell champion and leader, and I've been thrust with the responsibility working with the directorate in risk and management. I think Paul is aware of that. I'm a chief coordinator with a colleague here at UNISA. We are pulling together the UNISA Comprehensive Open Distance e-learning symposium, which is taking place Monday and Tuesday. We have 200 delegates. I'm raising this because the discussions that emanate from the book feed into our pursuit on Monday. We are trying to unbundle and understand our identity. The claims now is, and Paul and I, they mull over that. There are things that happen at the practice where we as the experts see it. But there are also things that happen at the management level, which are intended largely to drive a very powerful rhetorical message. I mean, the idea that UNISA is the largest, is the oldest university in Africa, it's a myth. I mean, people at the National Open University of Nigeria in Scotland, I was sitting with the Vice Chancellor, and he was bringing in the numbers. And I was thinking, we cannot call ourselves the largest open university on the African continent when they still noun. I mean, relative to statistics, Nigeria has over 200 million people. We are hardly 70. Our student enrollment has, I think we hit 400,000, Paul, and then we had to downgrade because we couldn't manage it. We cannot talk like that with Noun and Indira Gandhi. So, but these are narratives that are being peddled at the higher level. So the symposium is intended to enable us to understand that. So, but coming back to our chapter, I'm not going to go into the details, but I know that I had to and fro with Prof. Panda and Dr. Mishra. And thank you for the critique. I brought in our mentees, my postdoctoral fellow, and a young, newly appointed associate professor, Ramashihu Mphahlele. And they were saying, but Prof, why are these people on our case? Why are they pointing fingers? And I said, that's what scholarship is all about. Scholarship is engaged, is interrogated. No one has answers. But what we did was to get into the nuances of UNISA. And I just want to latch on one of the debates that is still raging. And Paul and Mpine Makwe have been in the forefront of that. In our chapter, we draw largely on a presentation that Paul gave at some stage, interrogating the idea of openness. We call ourselves an open distance e-learning. Now we are calling ourselves a comprehensive open distance e-learning universities. But the question that still, is at the back of our mind is, how open are we? I don't think we are open, and I don't think we'll be open in the long run. And the danger is we are tied in the deadline mantra. I mean, our students are constantly victimized, or they're constantly shortchanged, because even though we call ourselves open, my understanding, and then Paul can share that, is that when you are open, you learn at your own pace, at your own time, and that's what it is. But we have deadlines, and we have lots and lots of students that either have to appeal or they fail modules because they've missed the deadline. And I think that's something that we bring out in our last chapter. And I think we need to, I would rather see, Prof. Panda, where we have another book where we say, how open are open universities? If we can get into that, and then we can bring in all these controversies and lay them up in the open, I think then we will move the agenda differently. But it will also help us to begin to understand what it means to be in the space of open distance e-learning. The former Vice Chancellor of the old University of Natal, and she became the Vice Chancellor of the Open University, wrote a paper where she unpacked, and I think with Professor Andy Lane, they unpacked the openness of the Open University. And I think the issues that they raised in that paper resonate with me. I've used that paper on a number of times to say, if we call ourselves open, let's first of all
have a nuanced understanding of what is open. What do we mean by open? Are we running our universities compliant with the open nomenclature, or are we doing something else? Again, I know bureaucracy. People will say, if you don't have the bureaucracy, you can't control, then we can't have order. Openness is about access, and access will have its own risks and challenges, and then we need to manage the process. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. I was about to say you to stop, but you stopped. So very interesting. You have given a suggestion, a new project, how open university is. So Dr. Misra is smiling. So maybe that could be his next project. So let me get back to Professor Elijah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to contribute my remarks and reviews about this great book. First, I join my colleagues to congratulate the authors or the reviewers, Professor Misra and Professor Panda, who are the editors of this book. This is a beautiful piece of work that you have done. I was going through the book and I was getting insights, one after another, new concepts about openness and what differences there is between a good university and a world-class university. I just thought that's an interesting way of trying to classify and find ourselves in the right place, whether we are world-class or a good university. I also found it interesting as one of the concepts about open universities, the idea that a university must be growing with ideas. And where I think the authors of that particular chapter is trying to draw a parallel between a Martha and a Mary kind of descriptive way of looking at things. And I liked it because in the Martha model, you're looking at the human mind as a vessel that is ready to receive knowledge and use that knowledge to change the world. Then on the other side of the Mary perspective, that the human mind requires a spark for it to operate well. Lovely, interesting concept there. And I'm agreeing with the previous colleague right now that perhaps we need another book to interrogate this concept further, the issues of openness, the issues of world-classness, and concepts of goodness and all that. I think that must be the next project. So to our great editors, your job is well cut. Now, to comment very briefly about the Open University chapter, I want to thank Professor Maritim, who actually set the spark for us to do this book, this particular chapter. The Open University indeed is the new kid in the block, just 1.5 years old, precisely so, because we were chartered on the 3rd of August 2023, and therefore we're just about 2 years old. The university subscribed the full concepts of openness in terms of flexibility, availability at all times, use technology to ensure access is there for everybody who wishes to go through our programs, the concept of recognition of prior learning, but more importantly, the university is using the stack credentials to give degree programs. In other words, a student or rather a learner who comes on board will accumulate credentials in terms of modules or micro-credentials, which together will earn this student the qualifications for the degree program. In other words, every effort counts, and we don't discriminate what portfolio the student is building around the concepts that are within the program that the student is going through. So we are supporting our students using AI tools, which we've just invested in, open AI concepts such as following the student learning capabilities and putting in just on time interventions. And that's a model that we have found to be working even this nascent stages of embracing AI. The other point I want to mention is about examinations. We have run several examinations now. We are going into the 8th one, and we have described, how we are carrying out this process because it's not an easy thing. And we're happy to learn from the various ideas in the other chapters of this book on how we can improve on how to carry out our examinations so that the quality that we aspire and subscribe to is truly maintained and seen to be working. But finally, I want to recommend that this book be made available in different ways, one of which is what we're doing right now, to create this video to describe the book in different ways using various perspectives in the book, but also how we can miniaturize the concepts in there into platforms such as LinkedIn, social media platforms, X, and any other areas where we want the book to be domiciled, to reside in its various forms, miniaturized that we can be able to break it into. Because a book of 700 pages, to bring it to a place like in LinkedIn or X requires a mind-boggling capability so that it's able to speak to what it is meant to without compromising its quality. So much that I can say about our chapter, but I turn off there and maybe request our chair, co-author, my co-author, the main author actually, Professor Maritim. Sir, if you allow, speak it out from there. Thank you so much.
A very beautiful speech. So thank you very much. I will not add a lot about what my vice chancellor has mentioned. And I want to say thank you again, the editors, for giving us opportunity as an open university to tell our story about where we have come from and the context in which we are operating. The VC has elaborated on that, but I want to say this book has exposed us to a number of situations. When I read the various universities, I've read the University of Mauritius, I've read about the Open University of Israel, and I want to see how we are in a way related or have similar parameters. And what I'm picking is that as we sell the idea of openness in our country, Kenya, these are the examples that our policymakers will pick from. That an open university to be real open, we might not go the Open University of Israel at this particular stage, but that is an ideal situation. And I'm happy today that I'm meeting colleagues. They might not have been there at the time I was at UNISA in 2007 and 2009. And I also read in the book, my concern was, what is new in UNISA from the time I was there? I read a lot. The same thing in the Open University of Tanzania. When I left the UNISA, of course, I went to Open University of Tanzania. And again, I'm happy that there is a story about the Open University of Tanzania. As the Open University of Kenya, we are happy that we'll use the book again to sell the idea of openness in our country, which we are still very new in that particular situation. So I'm happy and thank the editors for inviting us to join this particular drive for openness. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Maritim. I think we have very less time. I will now hand over to Dr. Misra to at least have one critical question from Paul. So, and Paul has written the overview chapter as an authority. So at least we have about 8 to 10 minutes. So if you can put to your choice the question to Paul to critically sum up the African context and the regulatory and other mechanisms. So it is over to Dr. Sanjaya.
Thank you, Professor Panda. I think it has been an excellent session so far. So many insights coming from colleagues, suggestions. One of the common thread that I see is the idea of openness. We try to discuss the idea of openness in the book and requested all authors to reflect on how open their open universities are. We didn't want it to be very prescriptive, and I think there is still a scope for further critical engagement about openness. And just to remind here, and also for the viewers who would see this video later, also to go back to the first book discussion recorded with Professor Sir John Daniel, who was alluding about the idea of openness and was referring to the openness framework that we have discussed throughout this Handbook of Open Universities. He was talking about that these are excellent way of looking at things, but at the end of the story, we need to be careful about what is critical elements of openness. We need to focus on those critical element of openness to have open universities as a sustainable educational practice for public good. So this is something that I took from that video and discussion. Similarly, this is what I would like to emphasize and ask this question to start with Prof. Prinsloo, and I would ask each one of you to give a cryptic response, quick response, so that we can closely end in about next 5 minutes or so. So how do you see the developments of open universities, online learning, dual mode institutions in your country and the African subcontinent as a whole? What are the critical success factors and issues? Quickly, starting from Prof. Prinsloo. Prof.
Oh my goodness, what a question, and you want it to be cryptic.
Uh,
I think government support and government buy-in for the ODL project is essential. Without government protection and government a mandate for open distance learning, open distance learning on the African continent faces very harsh competition. That's my cryptic answer.
Excellent, excellent. I think this is a very critical point. Prof. Letseka.
Thanks. Look, for me, the underlying philosophy is when you say you are open, for me, it's about access. Open universities are supposed to be characterized largely by their accessibility. So, and I want to align myself with Paul. Unfortunately, access means opening doors to millions of people that are excluded. And the world of education from time immemorial has been a selective world. It's about who passes what. And openness, open universities are debunking that. Everybody has to have access, and then we have to find multiple admission measures to bring people in. But to correct that, again, to go to Paul, governments need to look into how they support communities, societies in terms of having access to that. So for me, that's a kicker. We need to refine our access principles and have frameworks at a strategic level, how we support those access to ensure that everyone gets access and we don't prejudice people because of their geographic, class, or gender disparities. Thanks.
Dr. Seeletso, you can go ahead.
Which I think colleagues have said it all. Actually, we need to see agility in the delivery and support of open and distance learning. So for me, the magic words that I would like to summarize are, we need to offer good education, quality education, access, and not just access, but even equity and inclusion. How open and how inclusive are we as ODL or ODEL institutions? So this is food for thought. And yes, I agree that there be a call for another project where we will be talking about not only openness, but about inclusion of those that are differently abled or differently gifted. Thank you.
That's a very good point. Prof. Eliza?
Thank you very much. I think Professor Moeketsi Letseka has said, taken words from my mouth. I'm proposing that governments must try and expand access to the internet. In Kenya, we are about 45% on average. In some places, it's as high as 80%. Because without the internet, then the future of learning, which is digital, will not be realized. So that is my appeal, that as we aspire to invest in flexible mode of delivery, access must be at the center of this, and governments must deliberately ensure that the digital hubs that we're talking about, opportunities where people can get access and be supported to get into the access of these various programs. And finally, learning must be engaging, it must be interactive, and it must be enjoyable. And that's where we must invest in other technologies to support that. We are now talking in the era of AI and other technologies. Those must be well harnessed, packaged in order to deliver quality learning, not just technology for the sake of it. Thank you very much.
That's excellent point, Prof. Elijah, particularly for student engagement in the ODL context. I think it's very important for all open universities, not just in Africa, Kenya, Africa. It's everywhere in the world. Very good point. Prof. Maritim, your points on observation, because you have a wide experience in many countries and you have been reading a lot. What is the common thing that you see in Kenya, Africa, and elsewhere?
I think sometimes we misunderstand, or the policymakers misunderstand the concept of openness. Now, when that arises, the best way to communicate with them is the concept of flexibility. They might not understand that we are saying the same thing. If we are flexible with respect to cost of education, meaning in terms of how the student access, if the cost is rescheduled in different ways, then we are still open. Now, similarly, that again, as my VC has mentioned, flexible with respect to how we admit, how we access the university. All these means the same thing to a policymaker, but we might understand more if we say we are flexible. Well, sometimes openness, depending on the context, is taken differently by different people we deal with in the sphere of education. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you very much, each one of you.
I want to say in a minute that the discussions that have gone on around the book and around the chapters that we have written are indicating to us that this is a process of change. And coming back from the social sciences, change is a process. And if it is okay that we are appealing to governments to play a role, but most of the change processes that we have seen have come from the actors who are feeling that it has to be a changing environment around, particularly in this case, ODL. I regret the fact that we find ourselves in situations where ODL is continuously being pitted around what we refer to as conventional modes of delivery. But one thing that we would want to be aware of is that the transition is showing us that convention will very soon be ODL, and it has to be us driving the agenda. When I say us, I mean all of us who have now become a community of practice.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. It has been very, very enriching for all of us to learn from each other. Thank you once again. Dr. Misra will certainly conclude, but one or two things I would like to say, that our intention was to look at the future of open universities, the business model that can it sustain itself. As Paul rightly said, and other colleagues, that government buy-in is extremely essential. Flexibility is not irresponsibility. That we are flexible doesn't mean that we don't want to. So I hope I'm communicating. So therefore, we are flexible in the sense we're providing an alternative opportunity for a varieties of diversified students who could not be in the mainstream in one track. That was the point. So, and in the process also, we wanted to learn from each other. And in the process of contributing to this kind of a gigantic work. And number three, that we also wanted to tell the world that here is a future, not present, past, the future system of education, which is sustainable, which is doable, and which is desirable. So, and without which we cannot really achieve our GER, the quality of learning, employability, diversified continuing education, lifelong learning, so on and so, gender equity, and so many things. So I think this is an interesting place where the book has captured, and each one of you has, and as I agree that while doing our own chapter, we have reflected on others also. And after the book came out, when we are reading others, we are enlightened more than when we were writing our own chapter, reflecting our own institution. So learning from each other is very important. That's what we are doing. And as Paul at the beginning rightly said, that our context is very important. We are all bound by context. As Professor Letseka says, that we have a historical context, and every university is different from the other. So therefore, learning from each other while still maintaining our own ground and our culture, our context is most essential. So that's what I'm learning from this work that we have been doing together. Now I hand over to Dr. Misra to conclude.
Thank you, Professor Panda. You rightly put that the whole experience of editing this work, which I consider a monumental work and very, very, very challenging work. You rightly pointed out that it was a truly learning experience for ourselves, learning from different countries, many places that we have not visited ourselves, many institutions we have not got ourselves. We learned from their stories, their way of expressions, the way they have presented. And it is really, really enriching for us. And we believe that it is also equally enriching for every one of our other authors and those readers who would like to have a copy of the book. Interestingly, the publisher is actually giving a 20% discount for the book. Anyone would interested, I would be actually putting the discount code on the description of this video when it is uploaded to the YouTube. But thank you very much, each one of you, for joining us today, and of course contributing your scholarly work to this book, making it worthy of what it is today. We are truly grateful to each one of you for your contribution and presence today. It's really, really an honor for both me and Professor Panda. Thank you very much. I would request you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, reshare the video, so that we are visible to more people.
So,
thank you, each one of you.
Thank you once again.
Bye-bye.
Thank you once again.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.